Welcome to Maths with EJD. In this video, I'll be talking about repeated games and strategies. That will be like the last video for now in the game theory series, except if there is something else that should come up. So this is the 35th video in that series for that matter. So if you have not subscribed to this channel, you're actually missing a lot. So you want to do that right now and hit the notification bell so you can always get alerted each time a new video is released. So we've talked about game theory. We've seen different types of games and all that. We've seen cooperative games, evolutionary games, and so on and so forth. So, um, in this case, we are looking at repeated games and strategies involved in repeated games. So, can we have an overview of repeated games? So, repeated games are a fundamental concept in game theory where players engage in the same game multiple times. Okay. Unlike single shot games, repeated interactions repeated interactions allow players allow players to adopt strategies that depend only that depend not only on the current game, but also on the outcomes of previous games. Okay. Now, repeated games are often used to model situations where individuals or firms interact over time, such as trade negotiations, trade negotiations, price competition, or social dilemmas. All right, so that takes us to the idea of, let's talk about types now. Types of repeated games. Types of repeated games. First of all, we have finite repeated games. Finite repeated games. Hmm. So here the game is played. The game is played for a predetermined finite number of rounds. Strategies often differ Strategies often differ in the final round since there is no future to consider. Okay. I mean, if something is at stake in the future, people may want to behave differently. Okay. Strategies often differ in the final round since there is no future to consider in the finite repeated games. Okay. On the other hand, we have infinitely repeated games. Infinitely repeated games. Plus, the name itself tells us what that should look like. So here, the game is played indefinitely, or the number of rounds is unknown. These games, these games often allow for cooperation. They often allow for cooperation since it's more like you're stuck. You have to keep playing. So these games often allow for cooperation through strategies like trigger strategies, trigger strategies, or tit for tat, where players respond to past actions to enforce cooperation. All right, so those are types of repeated games. Now that takes us next to key concepts. Key concepts in strategies. Okay, I mean, we've mentioned some two strategies, but let's see some key concepts that we may get to talk about when we talk about strategy. We have the Grim trigger strategy. That's one of the examples of trigger strategies, I believe. So we have the Grim trigger strategy. Grim trigger strategy. So here, a player cooperates as long as the other player cooperates. Okay. So if defection occurs, I mean, if a player betrays the other, so if defection occurs, the player defects. I mean, if someone betrays you, you betray them. That's the idea. So if defection occurs, the player defects forever in retaliation. Okay. So that's uh one way to go, one strategy. Then we have tit for tat. Tit for tat. So here a player starts by cooperating. The player starts by cooperating, and then mirrors the opponent's previous action. in subsequent rounds. So, I mean, if I'm the player now, I cooperate at first. If I see that the other player is defecting, then when the other player defects, I defect. When the other player cooperates, I cooperate. So, and it goes on that way. Then we have the Folk theorem. Folk theorem. So, in infinitely repeated games, a wide range, a wide range of outcomes can be sustained, can be sustained as Nash equilibria, provided provided players value future payoffs enough. In that case, we'll be talking about a high discount factor. So there's a high discount factor if players value uh future payoffs enough. Okay, so that's like those are the aspects of repeated games and strategies we need to know. So the next thing we want to do is to look at examples. Look at example. Okay, uh, let's look at example one, which is uh uh of course the most popular game we've seen so far is Prisoner's Dilemma. But we want to see it in the aspect of infinitely repeated game. So you can call it infinitely repeated prisoner's dilemma, something like this. Okay. So now the question is to consider the standard prisoner's dilemma. That's the most popular game we've referred to in this series so far. So consider the standard prisoner's dilemma, with the payoff we have here. So you have the first player, you have the first player who can either cooperate. Okay, let me bring it down. So you have the first player. Say this is player. Uh, okay, let me say this is player one. Player player one who can choose to either cooperate or defect. And then we have player two who can also cooperate or defect. So, and if they both cooperate, like we know, they both get 3-3 as payoff. If player two defects while player one cooperates, player one loses, gets nothing, and player two gets 5 points. If it's reversed and player one defects while player two cooperates, player one gets 5 and player two gets 0. If they both defect, they lose. I mean, they both get they get 1 each. So this is the payoff we have in this situation. Okay, so in this case, like we already know, these are the points to note. We have that single shot equilibrium. A single shot equilibrium. Okay. For the single shot equilibrium, we know both players defect. Both, I mean, we can run through that easily, right? If if we want to consider player one, what is the best pair for player one, right? So that means whatever player two does. So for player one, right? So um if player two, if player two cooperates, okay, like here, if player two cooperates, player one gets three or five. Okay. So in that case, um player one has two strategies, cooperate and defect, right? So no matter what player two does, if player one cooperates, okay, this is how we go for player one. So the best that player one can get is three instead of zero. So as a result of that, we have this is player one's okay, or let me use a color that I can easily manage. Okay, yeah. So this is the best option for player one. If player, if player, whatever player two does, if player one cooperates, this is the best thing. If player one defects, whatever happens, then this would be the best option. Uh, because here we have five and we have one. So five is bigger. So player one would rather choose this. Mm, is that a way to go? Yes. Yes, I think. So on the other hand, right, if player two, if you now look for player two, so if player, whatever player two does, if player one cooperates, then we see um that player two, okay, I mean, uh let me just continue with this. So both players, so in a single shot equilibrium, right? Both players, that's not what I want to use. Both players defect. So that's DD, and that ends them, and they both end 1-1 each, right? So they both defect. Then, if we now talk about repeated game, so if we do repeated game, repeated game with grim trigger strategy, okay? So what happens in this situation? So we see that both players start by cooperating. So if it is just one shot, everybody wants to get the maximum point, right? So they just go for 1-1. They both defect, then getting 1-1 each. But if it's repeated with a grim trigger, both players start by cooperating. That is CC. Okay, that's the first step. Then second step, if one defects, the other defects forever. Okay, that's another point in that. Then, if it's one off, right? Everybody feels, oh, what I want to let me defect, hoping that the other person cooperates so they can get the maximum 5 points each. By the end of the day, two of them end up defecting and they end up with 1-1 if it is just one off because there's no future there. So they don't have a problem, just messing the other person up. So if one defect, the other defects forever. Now we also have that cooperation. cooperation is sustained if the players, since there's a future, so if the players value the future sufficiently, okay? If the players value the future sufficiently, a rational person wants to do something that will guarantee them future benefits. So, of course, irrational people don't care. That is, if they value the future sufficiently, that means the discount factor, which is known as delta, actually satisfies this. So that, this is cooperate, this is defect, right? Well, the so for cooperate, right? And you have this similarity here. So you have this 50015, and you have this cooperate side there. So for sufficiently high discount factor, right? So that has to satisfy where both of them cooperate. And we have 3 plus 3 delta plus 3 delta squared, of course, plus 3 delta cube, and so on and so forth, and that is greater than or equal to 5 plus, so you see this 5 that is common like this. So that 5 plus then that 1 for defect. So you see this whole thing now. This whole thing now is for where the is for cooperation. Okay. And we have this 5 plus 1 delta plus 1 delta squared plus 1 delta cube, and so on and so forth. Okay. So here now you see this 5, of course, is for one-sided defection. One-sided defection. And here this is both cooperation, and then this is both defection, so to speak. That English is somehow, but I mean, you get what I'm talking about. So as the game is played repeatedly, so you have both of them cooperating. I think let me use better English and use a different color for effect, right? Okay. I guess I'm worrying too much, right? 1 plus delta cube plus all this. Okay. So as you can see, right, this is for uh this corresponds to cooperating. This corresponds with, did I say both cooperation? No. Yeah, that's both cooperating. Yeah, I think that's correct. So this is CC all the way. CC all the way. Then we have here, this is either CD or DC. That's what we have there. And for here now, of course, this corresponds with 1, which is everybody defecting. That's DD, as you can see. All right, so what this one ends up being is this. Imagine you have okay, I guess I want to switch gear here. Let me get other markers. This now, this, and this, okay? So you see that 3 plus 3 delta plus 3 delta squared plus 3 delta cube is the same thing as 3 into 1 plus delta squared plus delta cube, and so on and so forth. And this is a geometric series. So that's the same thing as 3 times sum to infinity of a geometric series, right, is actually 1. Okay, 1 divided by common ratio. The common ratio here is delta. Delta, 1 times delta is delta, delta times delta squared, and so on and so forth. 1 minus, so actually, it's a rather over 1 minus the common ratio delta. Okay. So, I mean, A is the first term, right? That's 1 over A is the first term over 1 minus the common ratio, which is delta, okay? So this now is 3 over 1 minus delta. So that goes for that. Then on the other side, you have, of course, this 5 is on its own. Then you have 1 plus delta squared, of course. 1 delta. So you have 1 delta plus, you have 1 delta plus 1 delta squared plus 1 delta cube plus all that. That is actually delta plus delta squared plus delta cube and so on and so forth. And that is, you can factorize delta. So you have delta into 1 plus delta squared plus all the rest. So now this is delta times, if you do sum to infinity, right? What I've just done, sum to infinity for a geometric sequence where you have 1 r squared, r cube, and so on and so forth, where this is common ratio, right? This is first term over 1 minus r, basically. So that's what I'm following. So here we have the first term is 1 all over 1 minus the delta, which is the common ratio. So now we have delta over 1 minus delta. So that is that whole expression, here. So in that case now, so we can say therefore, so okay, I guess I want to change now. So I say, so I guess we just used blue up there, right? Yeah, so let's go green now. So we see that from this expression, that 3 delta blah blah, that'll be 3 over 1 minus delta. So 3 over 1 minus delta is greater than or equal to 5 plus delta over 1 minus delta. That is this side now, okay? So we can simplify this to get the arrangement. And the best way to go, we can multiply 3 by 1 minus delta. So we have 3 over 1 minus delta times 1 minus delta is greater than or equal to 5 times 1 minus delta plus delta over 1 minus delta times 1 minus delta. Okay, so this cancels out, this cancels out. So we have 3 is greater than or equal to 5 into 1 minus delta plus delta. Okay, so that 3 is greater than or equal to 5 minus 5, 5 minus 5 delta plus delta. So that 3 is greater than or equal to 5 minus 5 delta plus delta is minus 4 delta. So that if you transfer this here, okay, so if we transfer 4 delta and we transfer 3 here, so we have 4 delta greater than or equal to 5 minus 3. So that 4 delta is greater than or equal to 2. And if we divide both sides by 4, so 4 delta over 4 is greater than or equal to 2 over 4. Yeah, that's 2 over 4, right? So 4 cancels out. So delta is greater than or equal to 1 over 2. So this is the condition. This is the condition, right? We say cooperation is sustained if the players value the feature sufficiently. That is, the discount factor delta satisfies this for CC. Then we have only that 5 and then all the rest of that. So we have 3 over 1 minus delta equals, so I guess I did all that right. Yeah, this cancels 5, 5 minus 5 delta plus, this cancels out here also. Yeah, so that goes. And then 5 into minus 5 delta plus delta, that's minus 4 delta for sure. 4 delta comes 5 minus 3 is 2. Yeah, I think that's what we have. So in this case, we say hence, uh, if delta is greater than or equal to 2 over 3, is greater than or equal to 1 over 2 is what I'm getting here. It's greater than or equal to 1 over 2. Cooperation can be an equilibrium. Cooperation can be an equilibrium. That means that instead of this dd, instead of this dd that should normally be an equilibrium, if delta is high, if we have delta to be half, then we can be sure of cooperation always happening. So that's the idea in this situation. So repeated games can lead to sustained cooperation at the end of the day because people don't want to keep losing. So people only want to cheat others when they know that those people may not bother cheating on them, something like this. So let's take example 2 now. I want to switch up all the pens. Let's go for this. And then what else? Yeah, I guess I can make do with, okay, let me switch it up here. This, and then let me go. What do I go do? What do I do here? So let me say, okay, this blue now. All right. So example 2. Example 2. So we have price competition. Price competition. And that is called a Bertrand game. Bertrand game. Okay. So Bertrand game. Here we have two firms. Two firms choose prices in each round of a repeated Bertrand competition. So they are competing over price, right? It's more like you're haggling prices. So two firms choose prices in each round of a repeated Bertrand competition. If both price at the monopoly price. So monopoly price is when you have no competition, right? And you can choose whatever. So if both price at the monopoly price PM, they earn monopoly profits. So that is unchecked profits in a way, right? So if one undercuts, it earns higher profits. It earns higher profits. If one undercuts, it earns higher profits in the short term, while driving the other to earn less, while driving the other to earn less. Okay. So in this case, see what we have. We have okay, we have firm. Okay, let me write that again. We have firm A and okay, let me do like a table so that it's easy to write what I want to write. So we have this. Yeah, I think this works better. So here we have firm A, and this is firm B, and then we have monopoly price, which is P sub M, and we have the undercut price, if you like. Okay, so same happens here. We have monopoly price, which is P sub M. And then we have the undercut, which confers undue advantage on whoever undercuts. So yeah, so something like this. And then we have the payoffs. This is pi M against pi M. We have 0, pi H. Then we have pi H, 0, and this is 0. This is 0, 0. Okay. So in this case, we can approach this using the undercut. We can use the Grimm strategy, rather, Grimm trigger strategy. Grimm trigger strategy. Grimm trigger strategy. So here we have that both firms price at PM initially. Okay. Then if one undercuts, the other reverts. So it's more like the prisoner's dilemma thing. So if one undercut, the other reverts to the competition price forever. To the competition price forever. Okay. So what is the condition for sustainability? So we have a condition for sustainability. So, and that condition will simply be pi M over 1 minus delta. Delta is the discount factor, right? And this is greater than or equal to pi H. Okay, greater than or equal to pi H plus 0 delta. You know that those 0, 0, right? 0 delta. You see this pi H now is where you have pi H 0, 0, pi H. So it's more like what we had the other time. And here we have 0, 0. Instead of having all that 1d squared, we have 0 delta, 0 delta squared, 0 delta cube, and so on and so forth. So ultimately we have pi sub M over 1 minus delta is greater than or equal to pi H. Okay. So we want to make delta the subject, as you can imagine. So that means we have pi M over 1 minus delta, all right, times 1 minus delta is greater than or equal to, so this delta now, it all depends on what it is, but let's assume it's less than 0, right? It's less than 1, right? So we can maintain that pi H multiplied by 1 minus delta is fine. So this cancels out. So we have pi M is greater than or equal to, uh, pi H minus delta pi H. So we need to leave delta alone so that we now have, so we have delta pi H is greater than or equal to pi H minus pi M. What we have simply done is to transfer this here and transfer this here. So delta pi H is equal to pi H minus pi M. And we can divide through by pi H. So we have delta pi H all over pi H is greater than or equal to pi H minus pi M divided by pi H. So then this cancels out. So we have delta is greater than or equal to pi H minus pi M all over pi H, all over pi H. So now this is the condition we are looking for. So, in short, we are saying that if firms value future profits, enough, okay, then we can say that delta is high And then collusion at PM will now be an equilibrium. Collision at PM is an equilibrium. So it's basically just like the prisoner's dilemma, except that this is for price competition. All right, so I also want to switch over to take the last example as we gradually draw to a close. So I go this, then I always like this brighten. Okay, let me go this, and then let's go some this light screen. It's been a while. Okay, so we take example three for repeated games. Example three, where we talk about for tat, tit for tat in iterated cooperation. Tit for tat in iterated cooperation. Okay, so we have this. So here, imagine that two countries engage in trade tariffs. Okay. Each round, they decide to impose a tariff, and that is more like defecting or not. When they impose a tariff, they defect. When they do not impose a tariff, they cooperate. Okay. So what happens? Tit for tat strategy. Okay, so that's that, right? So we can see what happens there. So it happens that tit for tat strategy, okay, leads to the fact that they start cooperating. So everybody starts by cooperating, no tariffs. They all start by cooperating, no tariffs. Then afterwards, they now match the opponent's previous action. The opponent's previous action. So if one of them begins to defect and they impose tariff, the other person also starts to impose tariff. So let's look at the scenario. Imagine the scenario. So now in round one, both cooperate. Okay, that's in round one. In round two, so country A defects, then country B retaliates. Country B will retaliate. Okay, I mean, let me just go round by round so it can just follow. So round two, country A in round two, country A defects, right? So automatically by defecting in round three now, round three, country B will retaliate. Country B retaliates because country A defected in round two. Then in round four, you now discover that country A will cooperate because they now know that country B will not agree with any mess. So country A cooperates, and then because it cooperates now in round five, then country B reciprocates that cooperation. Okay, so that's how that goes. So it's tit for tat. Do me, I do you. God no go vex, like we say in Nigeria. All right. So here is discovered that this strategy enforces cooperation. This strategy enforces cooperation over time enforces cooperation over time as long as both parties, as long as both parties recognize long-term benefits of mutual cooperation. Long-term benefits of mutual cooperation. Okay, so that goes. All right, so you see that repeated games highlight how strategies incorporating past actions can influence future outcomes, promoting cooperation or punishing defection. So that's how we see that. So we've seen works examples like the prisoner's dilemma and price competition illustrating the application of these strategies in real world scenarios. So for now, I believe this is the end of game theory, except something comes up in the future and I need to increase the playlist, add more videos to the playlist. So, but then of course, after now, many more things are still coming. Many more things are there on the channel for you already. So you want to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can always get alerted each time a new video is released. Then comment, let me know how helpful these videos are to you. And of course, let me know if there's a topic you'd like me to teach or a problem you'd like me to solve. And don't forget to like and share so that more people can have access to this great content coming out of this channel. Till I come your way again, enjoy your life by playing the games of life with wisdom. Bye.